The emergency alarm blared through Medical Station 7, its harsh tone cutting through the quiet of the night shift. Dr. Jack Stone looked up from his desk, his coffee forgotten as the red warning lights began to flash. After 15 years as the station's lead xenobiologist, he knew that middle-of-the-night emergencies usually meant trouble. Dr. Stone to Emergency Bay 3 immediately. The station's AI announced, its voice calm but urgent. Unregistered vessel approaching. Life signs detected. Critical condition. Jack grabbed his medical kit and ran. His footsteps echoed through the station's white corridors as he made his way to the emergency bay. Through the observation window, he could see a small ship attempting to dock. Its hull was damaged, showing signs of a difficult journey. "What do we know?" he asked Tom, the night shift technician who was already preparing the bay for arrival. "Not much, sir. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Something about their daughter dying. They're bright ones." Jack's heart rate picked up. The bright ones were a crystalline species, their bodies made of living crystal that glowed with inner light. In his entire career, he had only seen them twice, and never as patients. They rarely left their home system, and they almost never got sick. The airlock cycled, and Jack's eyes widened as two tall, crystalline figures rushed in. Their bodies sparkled like diamonds under the emergency lights, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the walls. In their arms, they carried a smaller figure that made Jack's breath catch in his throat. The young bright one's crystal body, which should have been glowing with a healthy pink light, was dark in places. Black patches spread across her surface like ink stains on paper. Her light flickered weakly. "Please," the taller of the two adults said, their words forming as patterns of light rather than sound. The station's translation system converted them to English. "Our daughter is dying. No one else will help us." Jack was already moving, gesturing toward the diagnostic bed. "Put her here." "How long has she been like this?" "3 cycles," the second parent said, their light patterns sharp with distress. "It started as a small dark spot. We thought it was normal variation, but it spread. None of our healers have seen anything like it." Jack ran his scanner over the child's crystal form. The readings made his forehead crease with concern. The dark patches weren't just surface deep. They seemed to be spreading through her entire crystal matrix. "You're the 4th medical station we've tried," the first parent said, their light dimming with despair. The others said they couldn't help, said they didn't have experience with crystal-based life forms. "Please, we'll give you anything. Technology, resources, knowledge, anything you want. Just save her." Jack looked at the child again. Her light was getting weaker by the minute. Most doctors would say treating her was impossible. Humans had barely begun to understand how crystal-based life forms worked. Attempting treatment could make things worse. But as he watched the parents hover over their daughter, their lights intertwining with hers in what he recognized as a gesture of love, he made his decision. "I'm not making any promises," he said firmly, already typing commands into the medical computer. "And I don't want your payment. But I'll do everything I can to help her." The parents' lights brightened with hope. "Thank you," they said together, their patterns synchronizing in a way that needed no translation. "Tom," Jack called to the technician, "get me everything we have on crystal formation and degradation, and contact Dr. Lee in materials science. We're going to need her expertise." As the emergency bay burst into activity, Jack looked down at his young patient. Her light flickered again, weaker this time. Whatever was causing this darkening, it was spreading fast. He had to figure it out before it was too late. He didn't know it yet, but this case would change not just his life, but the future of human alien medical science forever. Dr. Jack Stone stared at the test results on his screen, running his hand through his graying hair. After 6 hours of non-stop work, the news wasn't good. The dark patches in the young bright one's crystal structure were spreading like cancer, eating away at her healthy tissue. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Lee said, adjusting her microscope. The materials scientist had been examining samples of the darkened crystal under every type of scanner they had. It's as if the crystal matrix is forgetting how to be crystal. The child's parents stood nearby, their lights dim with worry. They had refused to leave the medical bay, their crystalline forms casting weak shadows on the white walls. The young one, whom they had started calling Rose because of her pink crystal tone, lay quietly on the bed, her light growing fainter by the hour. "Tell me again," Jack said to the parents, "has anything like this ever happened to your people before?" The taller parents' light flickered in what Jack had learned was a negative response. "Our kind does not get sick," they explained. "We grow, we change, we can be damaged by physical force, but we do not decay like this." Jack nodded, thinking hard. That was part of what made this so difficult. The bright ones had no concept of internal illness. Their medical technology, advanced as it was, focused entirely on repairing external damage. "What about your daughter's activities before this started?" he asked. "Did she go anywhere unusual? Touch anything strange?" The parents' lights pulsed as they communicated with each other. "She visited the crystal gardens on our home world," the shorter parent said. "Many young ones go there to learn about their growth patterns, but thousands visit every day. No one else is sick." Jack walked over to Rose's bed. The dark patches had spread another 2 centimeters in just the last hour. At this rate, he pushed the thought away. "Dr. Lee," he called, "what if we try to stimulate crystal regrowth in the damaged areas, like we do with human tissue regeneration?" "Impossible," one of the parents interrupted, their light sharp with distress. "Our crystal structure is unique. Your methods would shatter her." "Their healing techniques use resonance frequencies," Dr. Lee explained, showing Jack a complex diagram. "But look at these readings. The darkened areas don't respond to any frequency we've tried. It's like they're dead." Jack felt his frustration rising. Everything they tried seemed to hit a wall. Human medical science didn't understand crystal-based life well enough, and Bright One medical knowledge didn't cover internal illnesses. Suddenly, Rose's monitoring equipment began to beep. Her light dimmed dramatically, the darkness spreading visibly across her surface. "She's crashing," Jack shouted, rushing to the bed. "Get me the emergency resonance generator." The parents' lights flared with panic as Jack and Dr. Lee worked frantically to stabilize their daughter. After several tense minutes, Rose's light steadied, but it was noticeably weaker than before. Jack looked at his young patient, then at her terrified parents. He thought of all the human children he'd treated over the years, how their parents looked at him with the same desperate hope he saw in these aliens' light patterns now. "Listen," he said firmly, facing the parents. "I need to try something different, something your people have never done before. It might be dangerous, but if we don't act soon." He left the sentence unfinished. The parents' lights dimmed for a moment as they communicated silently. Then they brightened with determination. "We trust you," they said simply. "Do whatever you must." Jack nodded, already forming a plan. "Dr. Lee, get me everything you have on piezoelectric crystals and contact engineering. We're going to need to build something completely new." As he looked at Rose's fading light, Jack knew they were in a race against time. But maybe, just maybe, human ingenuity could solve a problem that alien technology couldn't touch. Time was running out. Dr. Jack Stone watched as the dark patches spread across Rose's crystal form, now covering almost 30% of her surface. The young Bright One's light had grown so weak that they had to dim the medical bay lights to see it. "The darkening is spreading faster," Dr. Lee said, showing him the latest scans. "It's reached the secondary crystal layers. If it gets to her core matrix..." She didn't need to finish. They both knew that Rose wouldn't survive if the darkness reached her central crystal structure. Jack had been awake for 36 hours straight, trying everything he could think of to slow the spread. The parents hovered nearby, their own lights dimming with exhaustion and fear. The taller one approached Jack, holding out a small crystal that glowed with intense blue light. "This is a power core," they said, Their light pattern's urgent, worth more than 1,000 ships. It's yours if you save her. Jack shook his head. Keep it. I'm not doing this for payment. Then take our ship's technology. The shorter parent offered desperately. Our navigation systems are centuries ahead of yours. Our weapons. Listen, Jack interrupted, his voice firm but kind. Offering me things won't help Rose. I need you to focus. Tell me more about how young bright ones usually develop. There must be something we're missing. The parents' lights pulsed as they shared information about their species' normal growth patterns. As they talked, Jack noticed something interesting on one of Dr. Lee's screens. Wait, he said suddenly, pointing to a graph. Show me those energy readings again. Dr. Lee pulled up the data. These? They're just background measurements of Rose's crystal resonance. Look at the pattern, Jack said, excitement creeping into his voice. It's similar to how human cancer cells disrupt normal tissue frequencies, but in reverse. The darkness isn't just spreading. It's changing her crystal structure's natural vibration. He rushed to his computer, pulling up everything they knew about human cancer treatments. We've been thinking about this all wrong. We're not dealing with a disease like the bright ones fear. We're dealing with something more like human cancer. Cells that have forgotten their proper function. Rose's monitoring equipment suddenly began beeping rapidly. Her light flickered dangerously, and new dark patches appeared along her surface. She's destabilizing, Dr. Lee shouted. Jack moved quickly to the bed, his mind racing. The darkness is reaching her deeper crystal layers faster than we thought. We need to act now. The parents' lights flared with panic. What can we do? I have an idea, Jack said, already typing commands into the medical computer. But it's risky. We need to treat this like human cancer, not just the symptoms, but the underlying cause. Anything, the parents said together. Please. Jack turned to Dr. Lee. Get me the piezoelectric crystal arrays from engineering, all of them, and contact the station manager. We're going to need to redirect power from the main generators. You're going to try to reset her crystal matrix? Dr. Lee asked, her eyes wide. That's never been done before. The energy requirements alone. It's her only chance, Jack said firmly. The darkness is disrupting her natural crystal frequency. If we can generate a strong enough resonance field, we might be able to remind her crystals how to grow properly again. As Dr. Lee rushed off to gather the equipment, Jack looked at Rose's parents. I have to be honest. This is completely experimental. The power levels we'll need, they could shatter her crystal structure completely. The parents' lights dimmed for a moment, then brightened with determination. We understand, they said. Do what you must. Jack nodded, his expression grim. As he began preparing for the procedure, he silently hoped that human medical science would be enough to save this alien child's life. Dr. Jack Stone sat in his office, surrounded by samples of Earth crystals. For the past hour, he had been comparing them to the scans of Rose's darkening crystal structure. The young bright one's condition was getting worse by the minute, and he knew they were running out of options. Suddenly, he noticed something in one of the quartz samples. Under the microscope, its structure showed a pattern that looked surprisingly similar to the healthy parts of Rose's crystal matrix. Dr. Lee, he called out, his voice echoing through the medical bay. Come look at this. The materials scientist hurried over, adjusting her glasses as she peered through the microscope. That's just a standard piezoelectric crystal, isn't it? Yes, but look at how it responds to electrical stimulation, Jack said, applying a small current to the crystal. The quartz crystal vibrated, creating a faint humming sound. Its natural frequency is almost identical to Rose's healthy crystal patterns. Dr. Lee's eyes widened as she understood. You think we could use Earth crystals to help stimulate her healing? Before Jack could answer, a loud alarm sounded from Rose's bed. The darkness had spread to cover nearly half of her body now, and her light was barely visible. Her core temperature is dropping, one of the medical technicians announced. We're losing her. The bright one parents rushed to their daughter's side, their lights pulsing with fear. "Please," they begged Jack. "You said you had an idea." Jack looked at the quartz crystal in his hand, then at the dying alien child. "I think I know how to save her, but it's never been tried before. We'd need to create a massive crystal resonance chamber, using Earth crystals to generate the right frequency patterns. That would take enormous power," Dr. Lee warned. "And if the frequency is even slightly wrong, she could shatter," Jack finished grimly. "I know." The parents' lights flickered as they communicated silently with each other. Finally, the taller one spoke. "How sure are you this will work?" Jack took a deep breath. "Based on the crystal similarities I'm seeing, maybe 60%, but if we do nothing, she'll be gone within hours." Another alarm blared as Rose's vital signs weakened further. The parents' lights dimmed with grief, then brightened with determination. "Do it," they said together. Jack sprang into action. "Dr. Lee, get engineering to convert Bay 5 into a resonance chamber. We'll need every piezoelectric crystal on the station. Tom, start redirecting power from non-essential systems." As the medical bay burst into activity, Jack heard worried whispers from other doctors who had gathered to watch. "It's too risky," one said. "We've never attempted anything like this with crystal-based life forms." "He's going to kill her," another warned. "The power levels alone could destroy the entire crystal matrix." Jack ignored them, focusing on calibrating the equipment. He knew they were right about the risks, but he also knew this was Rose's only chance. "The resonance chamber is ready," Dr. Lee reported after 30 minutes of frantic work. "But Jack, the power requirements. We'll be pushing the station's generators to their limits." Jack looked at Rose, her light now so faint it was barely visible. The darkness had spread even further, creeping toward her core crystal matrix. Then he looked at her parents, who stood watching him with desperate hope in their dimming lights. "Get her into the chamber," he ordered, "and tell engineering to prepare for maximum power output." As they carefully moved Rose into the crystalline chamber, Jack silently prayed that his understanding of crystal structures was correct. Because if he was wrong, he wouldn't just fail to save her, he might actually speed up her death. The parents' lights pulsed with anxiety as Jack began the final preparations. Everything now depended on whether human technology could work in harmony with alien biology. The resonance chamber hummed with energy as Dr. Jack Stone made his final checks. Hundreds of Earth crystals lined the walls, each carefully positioned to create the perfect frequency pattern. In the center lay Rose, her once bright crystal form now almost completely dark. "Power systems at 80% capacity," Tom reported from his console. "The station's backup generators are online. Crystal array frequencies synchronized," Dr. Lee added, her fingers moving quickly across her control panel. "But Jack, are you sure about the power levels? We've never pushed the crystals this hard before." Jack looked through the chamber's observation window at Rose's parents. Their lights pulsed with worry as they watched their daughter. He couldn't fail them now. "We have to try," he said firmly. "Rose's core crystal matrix is almost completely corrupted. It's now or never." The station's chief medical officer, Dr. Richards, burst into the control room. "Stone, stop this immediately. You're going to destroy the station's power grid. And worse, you could shatter that child into 1,000 pieces." Jack stood his ground. "With all due respect, sir, we've tried everything else. This is her only chance." "You're risking everything on a theory," Richards shouted. "You can't possibly know how an alien life form will react to Earth crystal frequencies." Before Jack could respond, one of Rose's monitoring alarms began to scream. Her light was failing fast, the darkness spreading visibly across her remaining bright patches. "We're losing her," Dr. Lee called out. "Core crystal integrity dropping." Jack pushed past Richards to the main control panel. "Start the procedure. Now." The chamber filled with a high-pitched whine as power flowed into the crystal arrays. Rose's parents pressed against the observation window, their lights dimming with fear. 20% power, Tom announced. The Earth crystals began to glow, their frequencies building slowly. 40%, Dr. Lee added. Rose's outer crystal layer is responding, but the darkness isn't receding. Jack watched the readings carefully. More power, push it to 60%. The chamber's walls vibrated as the crystal resonance increased. Small items began falling off nearby shelves. Warning, the station's AI announced. Power grid reaching critical levels. 70% power, Tom called out, his voice tense. Station systems are starting to fail. Dr. Richards grabbed Jack's arm. Stone, you have to stop this. You'll destroy the station. But Jack's eyes were fixed on Rose's readings. The darkness had stopped spreading, but it wasn't retreating either. They needed more power. 80%, he ordered. Route everything we have to the crystal arrays. The lights in the medical bay flickered and died, leaving only the emergency systems and the glow from the resonance chamber. Rose's form began to vibrate visibly. Jack, Dr. Lee warned, her crystal structure is becoming unstable if we push any harder. 90% power, Jack commanded, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Hold it there. The chamber filled with brilliant light as the Earth crystals reached their maximum safe output. Rose's body lifted slightly off the bed, suspended in the energy field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, terrifyingly, a crack appeared in Rose's surface. Stop, Dr. Richards shouted. You're killing her. But Jack had seen something else, a tiny spot of pink light shining through the darkness near the crack. His theory had been right. The Earth crystals weren't just fighting the darkness. They were helping Rose's natural light break free. Full power, he ordered quietly. Give it everything we got. The station groaned as its power grid pushed to its absolute limit. In the chamber, Rose's cracked surface began to glow. The resonance chamber blazed with blinding light as every crystal in the array pulsed at full power. Rose's cracked surface continued to glow brighter, but more cracks were appearing across her crystal form. Critical warning, the station's AI announced. Power grid failure imminent. Structural damage possible. Dr. Richards grabbed the emergency shutdown switch, but Jack caught his hand. Wait, look at the readings. Through the cracks in Rose's surface, pink light was beginning to shine more strongly. The darkness around each crack was starting to fade, retreating from the growing light. Her core crystal matrix is reactivating, Dr. Lee said excitedly, pointing to her screen. The Earth crystal frequencies are working. Suddenly, a loud cracking sound filled the chamber. A large split appeared down the center of Rose's crystal form. No, her parents cried, their lights flaring with terror. They tried to rush into the chamber, but Tom held them back. You can't go in there, he warned. The energy field would destroy you. Jack's heart pounded as he watched more cracks spread across Rose's surface. Had he made a terrible mistake? Was he about to shatter her completely? Then he noticed something strange. The cracks weren't breaking Rose apart. They were following the lines of darkness, splitting her crystal structure along the corrupted areas. It's working, he whispered. Then louder, it's working. Her body is separating the darkened crystal from the healthy areas. The chamber filled with a sound like breaking glass as pieces of darkened crystal began falling away from Rose's form. Underneath, healthy pink crystal glowed with increasing strength. Power systems failing. Tom shouted over the noise. We're losing the crystal array. One by one, the Earth crystals lining the chamber began to crack and go dark, burned out by the massive energy they had channeled. The chamber's glow started to fade. No, not yet, Jack said desperately. She needs more time. Dr. Lee typed frantically at her console. Rerouting emergency power. 10 seconds is all I can give you. The chamber brightened again as the last reserves of power flowed into the remaining crystals. Rose's body lifted higher in the energy field, more darkened crystal falling away. 5 seconds, Dr. Lee called out. The final pieces of darkness were still clinging to Rose's core matrix. 4 seconds. Her pink light grew stronger, pushing against the remaining darkness. 3 seconds. The last Earth crystals began to crack. 2 seconds. Rose's light suddenly flared brilliantly, burning away the final traces of darkness. 1 second. The chamber went dark as the power finally failed. Emergency lights kicked in, revealing Rose's form settling gently back onto the bed. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. Then, slowly, Rose began to glow. Not with the weak light of her illness, but with a strong, steady pink radiance that filled the chamber with color. Crystal matrix stabilizing, Dr. Lee reported, her voice shaking with emotion. All readings returning to normal parameters. The chamber doors slid open, and Rose's parents rushed to their daughter's side. Their lights intertwined with hers, creating a beautiful display of shifting colors. The darkness. The taller parents said in wonder, "It's completely gone." Indeed, where Rose's crystal form had been covered in dark patches, now only healthy, glowing crystal remained. The corrupted pieces lay scattered around her, already crumbling to dust. Jack slumped in his chair, exhausted but relieved. Dr. Richards placed a hand on his shoulder. "I was wrong," the chief medical officer admitted quietly. "You just made medical history, Stone." As Jack watched the alien family's joyful reunion, he knew that this was more than just a medical breakthrough. It was proof that human ingenuity, combined with the willingness to take risks for the right reasons, could accomplish the impossible. 1 month after the groundbreaking procedure, Dr. Jack Stone stood in the newly rebuilt Medical Bay 5, watching Rose play with a collection of small Earth crystals. Her pink light was stronger than ever, creating beautiful patterns as she made the crystals resonate with her touch. "She's completely recovered," Dr. Lee said, showing him the latest scan results. "In fact, her crystal structure is even stronger than before. The Earth crystal frequencies somehow helped her develop a natural resistance to the darkening." Rose's parents approached Jack, their lights bright with happiness and gratitude. The taller one held out a small device that glowed with swirling colors. "This contains the complete technical specifications of our fastest ships," they said. "As we promised, anything you want is yours." Jack smiled and gently pushed the device back. "Keep it. I told you before, I didn't do this for payment." "Then what can we give you?" the shorter parent asked. "Our people owe you a debt we can never repay. You didn't just save our daughter. You discovered a cure for an illness we didn't even know could exist." Jack looked at Rose again, watching as she made the Earth crystals sing with light. An idea he'd been thinking about for weeks finally crystallized in his mind. "Actually, there is something," he said, "but it's not for me. It's for everyone." He led the family to his office, where he pulled up plans on his computer screen. "What if we created a joint medical research program? Humans and bright ones working together, combining our knowledge of crystal science with your understanding of crystal-based life." The parents' lights pulsed with interest as Jack continued. "Think about it. Your people never get sick, so you never develop treatments for internal illnesses. But humans, we've spent centuries learning to fight diseases. Meanwhile, your crystal technology is far beyond ours. Together, we could help both our species." "A medical exchange program," Dr. Richards said from the doorway, where he had been listening. "That's actually brilliant." The parents communicated silently for a moment, their lights dancing together. Then they turned to Jack. "We will take your proposal to our council," they said, "but we think they will agree. Already, other bright ones have asked about the treatment that saved Rose." 6 months later, Jack stood in front of the newly constructed Human Bright One Medical Academy on Earth's moon. The building was a beautiful blend of human and alien architecture, its crystal spires catching the sunlight and transforming it into cascading rainbows. Rose and her parents were there for the opening ceremony, along with dozens of other bright ones and human medical professionals. As Jack cut the ribbon, a strand of crystalline light, He remembered that desperate night when an alien family had begged him to save their daughter. Today marks a new chapter in medical science, he said to the gathered crowd. But more than that, it marks a new chapter in understanding between our species. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from advanced technology or huge resources, but from being willing to try something new and from caring enough to take risks for each other. Rose floated up to him, her light bright and healthy. She held out a small pink crystal that pulsed in perfect harmony with the earth crystals in the building's walls. "For you," she said in newly learned English, her light forming the words, "to remember." As Jack held the crystal, feeling its warm resonance, he knew that this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, other alien children might be facing their own battles with illness. But now, thanks to one family's desperation and human determination, they would have a better chance. The crystal in his hand pulsed with light, a reminder that in the vast universe, compassion and ingenuity could bridge any gap, even the one between species made of flesh and species made of living crystal.